Most men miss this moment, not because it's invisible, but because they mislabel it. They tell themselves, she's just being nice, she's just friendly, she's like this with everyone. And by the time they realize the truth, the moment has already passed. Because attraction doesn't announce itself loudly, it whispers. And if you don't know how to listen, you mistake desire for politeness. Let's talk about the difference. Emotional investment is the quiet divider between someone who is simply well-mannered and someone who is genuinely drawn to you. Politeness is surface level. It costs nothing and risks nothing. Emotional investment, on the other hand, requires energy, attention, and vulnerability. When a woman is emotionally invested, she is not just responding to you, she is engaging with you. She is mentally present even when you're not around. She thinks about how conversations unfold, how you react, what you mean beneath your words. Politeness ends when the interaction ends. Emotional investment lingers. It follows her home into her thoughts, into the small moments where she replays something you said or wonders why a certain silence felt heavier than it should have. You can see emotional investment in effort that isn't demanded. She initiates conversations without needing a reason. She circles back to topics you mentioned days or weeks ago, not because she's trying to be impressive, but because those details stayed with her. Polite people respond when spoken to. Emotionally invested people return. They check in. They create continuity. If she asks how something turned out, a meeting, a decision, a problem you mentioned in passing, that's not friendliness, that's presence. Emotional investment means she has placed you somewhere in her internal world. And now your experiences feel relevant to her emotional landscape. Another sign is the way she listens. Politeness listens to reply. Emotional investment listens to understand. When she's invested, she doesn't rush to fill silence or redirect the conversation back to herself. She lets you finish. She absorbs what you're saying. Sometimes she pauses before responding because what you said mattered enough to consider. She notices inconsistencies, emotional shifts, moments where your tone changes. She doesn't interrogate, she observes. An observation is intimacy in its earliest form. This is where many men misread the situation, assuming warmth equals friendliness without realizing that emotional focus is being quietly directed toward them. Emotional investment also reveals itself in restraint. When a woman is merely polite, she has no stake in how she's perceived. But when she's invested, she becomes subtly careful. She chooses her words. She softens certain opinions or clarifies them. She becomes aware of how things might land with you. Not because she's suppressing herself, but because your perception now carries weight. Emotional investment means your reaction matters. It means she is no longer indifferent to how you experience her presence. That internal calibration doesn't happen in casual friendliness. Perhaps the clearest distinction is emotional risk. Emotional investment invites vulnerability in small, controlled ways. She shares something personal but not obvious. She admits uncertainty. She lets you see a layer that most people don't reach. Politeness keeps everything safe and neutral. Emotional investment allows slight imbalance. There's a willingness to lean in without knowing exactly how you'll respond. And that willingness is never accidental. It's the mind quietly saying, this person is worth the exposure, worth the emotional currency, worth staying present for, even when there's nothing to gain immediately, worth choosing again and again without needing a reason. Consistency is what separates momentary warmth from genuine attraction. Anyone can be attentive once. Anyone can be charming on a good day, in a good mood, under the right circumstances. But attraction doesn't rely on circumstances. It survives across time, mood, and environment. When a woman is attracted to you, her behavior doesn't fluctuate wildly depending on convenience. It steadies, it repeats, it shows up even when there is no obvious reward. Consistency is not dramatic or loud. It's quiet and reliable, which is why it's often overlooked. Men tend to focus on intensity, mistaking occasional enthusiasm for interest while missing the deeper signal of repeated intentional engagement. A friendly person responds when paths cross. An attracted person finds ways for those paths to cross again. She doesn't disappear for long stretches without reason. Even when busy, her presence reappears in small forms. a message, a reference, a reaction. Not because she's obligated, but because attraction pulls attention back naturally. You'll notice that she doesn't need reminders to stay connected. She doesn't reset to emotional neutrality after every interaction. There's continuity in her tone, her curiosity, her openness. What she gives you today resembles what she gave you yesterday, and it carries forward instead of starting from zero. Consistency also shows in emotional availability. When she's attracted, her warmth doesn't vanish the moment you show interest or confidence. Friendly people often retreat once interaction deepens because their engagement was never meant to hold emotional weight. But attraction doesn't retreat from depth. It leans into it. She remains receptive when conversations become personal. She doesn't suddenly turn guarded or distant when the dynamic shifts slightly. Her energy may adjust, but it doesn't collapse. That steadiness is the clue. Attraction is not fragile. It adapts without withdrawing. Another overlooked sign is how she treats you across different settings. If her attention only exists in one context, at work, in a group, during convenience, it may be friendliness. But consistency follows you beyond context. Her demeanor doesn't drastically change when others are around or when the situation shifts. She doesn't become colder in public and warmer in private, or vice versa. There is a recognizable through-line in how she engages with you. The consistency of that through line reveals intention. People protect what matters to them by maintaining it across environments. Consistency also exposes priority, not in grand gestures, but in small decisions. Who does she respond to when she has limited time? Who does she update without being asked? Who remains on her mind when life becomes chaotic? Attraction naturally organizes priorities. It doesn't demand attention, but it earns it. When a woman is attracted, you don't have to wonder where you stand every time you speak. Her behavior answers that question repeatedly without explanation through the simple fact that she keeps choosing to show up in the same way. What confuses many men is inconsistency dressed up as mystery. Hot and cold behavior often gets misinterpreted as hidden attraction, when in reality it's usually emotional uncertainty or lack of interest. Attraction simplifies behavior. It doesn't complicate it. When it's present, signals align instead of contradict each other. Her words, actions, and energy tell the same story over time. Consistency removes guesswork because attraction doesn't require decoding. It reveals itself through repetition, through reliability, through the absence of confusion, through the quiet pattern of someone who continues to engage even when nothing is forcing them to, even when there is no audience, even when the moment passes and the interest remains present in the spaces between interactions. Subtle testing is one of the most misunderstood expressions of attraction because it rarely looks like interest on the surface. In fact, it often appears as resistance, teasing, or emotional distance, which is why many men misinterpret it as disinterest. But when a woman is attracted, she doesn't immediately offer certainty. She looks for safety, stability, and emotional intelligence first. Testing is how she gathers that information without asking directly. These tests are not manipulative. They are instinctive. They exist to answer one question quietly running in the background. How does he respond when things are not perfectly smooth? One of the most common forms of subtle testing is light disagreement. She may challenge an opinion that isn't particularly important, not to argue, but to observe how you handle friction. Does your tone shift? Do you become defensive, dismissive, or eager to please? Or do you stay grounded, curious, and relaxed? Attraction is strengthened when she sees emotional regulation in real time. Friendly interactions avoid tension altogether. Attraction invites a small amount of it just to see what happens next. The test isn't about being right. It's about emotional steadiness under pressure. Another test appears as playful withdrawal. She might respond a little slower, become briefly less expressive, or create a small gap where there was closeness before. This isn't a game, it's a gauge. She's watching whether you panic, overcompensate, or collapse into insecurity. Attraction looks for confidence that doesn't demand reassurance. If you remain composed, she feels safe leaning back in. Politeness never creates this dynamic because there's nothing at stake. Testing only appears when emotional stakes are present. Teasing is another subtle form of testing that often goes unnoticed. She might poke fun at a habit, exaggerate a flaw, or lightly mock something about you. The content of the tease doesn't matter. Your response does. If you can laugh, stay self-assured, or even play along without shrinking or posturing, you pass the test. Attraction grows when she sees that your sense of self isn't fragile. Friendly teasing exists, but it lacks emotional curiosity. Testing carries intent. She's not trying to embarrass you, she's trying to understand you. Subtle testing also happens through vulnerability. She may share something slightly personal and watch how you hold it. Do you rush to fix it? Do you minimize it? Do you listen without hijacking the moment? This test isn't verbalized, but it's deeply felt. Emotional attraction looks for someone who can sit with complexity without needing control. When she opens a door just a little, she's checking whether you respect the space or force your way through it. What makes subtle testing confusing is that it's rarely consistent in form, but it's consistent in purpose. Each test is an invitation to reveal your emotional maturity without being told that's what's happening. Failing these tests doesn't mean rejection. It means uncertainty remains. Passing them doesn't guarantee anything that creates trust. Attraction doesn't want perfection. It wants predictability and character. Subtle testing is how she determines whether your reactions are dependable, whether your confidence is internal or performative, whether your calm is real or conditional, whether you can remain present without control, without fear, without needing the outcome more than the moment itself. Feminine curiosity is not about gathering information. It's about emotional orientation. When a woman is merely being friendly, her questions stay safe, polite, and socially appropriate. But when attraction is present, curiosity deepens and becomes selective. She doesn't just ask what you do or where you're from. She wants to understand how you think, what shapes your decisions, what excites you, and what unsettles you. This curiosity isn't interrogative or intense. It's flowing and natural, woven seamlessly into conversation. It signals that her attention has moved beyond social courtesy and interpersonal interest. This type of curiosity reveals itself through follow-up. She doesn't let your answers end the conversation. She expands them. One response opens the door to another question, then another. She tracks the emotional thread rather than the topic itself. If you mention a belief, she wonders how it formed. If you mention a goal, she wants to know what it means to you. Friendly curiosity gathers facts. Feminine curiosity seeks context. She's not trying to impress you with intelligence. She's mapping your inner world to see if there's resonance. Feminine curiosity also shows up in how she notices inconsistencies and nuances. She remembers how you reacted to something before and brings it up later, not to challenge you, but to understand you more fully. She senses shifts in your mood, tone, or energy and gently inquires without accusation. This awareness is not accidental. Attraction sharpens perception. When a woman is emotionally drawn to you, her intuition becomes focused. She starts reading between the lines, paying attention to what you don't say as much as what you do. Another expression of feminine curiosity is how she invites you to speak more. She creates space instead of filling it. Silence doesn't make her uncomfortable. She uses it to let you expand. She nods, mirrors, or encourages subtly, signaling that your thoughts are welcome. This is not passive listening. It's engaged presence. Politeness listens out of obligation. Curiosity listens out of desire. She wants to see how deep you go when you're given room and whether you're comfortable inhabiting your own perspective without performing. Feminine curiosity also includes emotional probing, though it's rarely direct. She may ask about your past experiences, not in a chronological way, but in an emotional one. What changed you? What taught you something important? What do you value now that you didn't before? These questions are gateways. They allow her to feel you, not just know you. Attraction is less concerned with biography and more concerned with emotional texture. She's exploring how you move through the world, how you interpret life, how you carry meaning. What many men miss is that feminine curiosity is selective. She doesn't offer this depth of attention to everyone. It requires emotional energy, and attraction determines where that energy goes. When she is curious about you, she is investing in understanding you beyond the surface, beyond convenience, beyond social roles. That curiosity creates a quiet intimacy long before anything is expressed verbally. It's how attraction builds a bridge without announcing it, how interest becomes focus, how attention becomes emotional alignment, how connection begins forming in subtle, unspoken ways that feel effortless yet intentional, where questions are not asked to fill silence, but to deepen presence, where interest feels organic rather than forced, where understanding becomes a form of closeness that grows naturally the more she leans into wanting to know you as you are. An energy shift is one of the most honest indicators of attraction because it happens before thought, before strategy, before intention. It's not something a woman consciously decides to do. It's something her body and presence reveal automatically. When she's simply being friendly, her energy remains steady, neutral, and evenly distributed. But when attraction enters the picture, something changes the moment you're around. Her posture adjusts, her movements become more intentional, and her attention sharpens. The room doesn't change, she does. This shift is subtle enough to be missed if you're not paying attention, but unmistakable once you learn to recognize it. You may notice that her voice sounds different with you. It might soften, slow down, or carry more warmth. Sometimes it becomes playful, sometimes more grounded, sometimes quieter. These changes aren't performed. They emerge naturally when someone feels emotionally attuned. Attraction creates a sense of focus, and focus alters energy. She becomes more present in her body, more aware of how she's showing up, not out of self-consciousness, but out of connection. Friendly conversations are efficient. Attracted energy lingers. She doesn't rush to exit the interaction. There's a sense of being settled into the moment. Another clear sign of an energy shift is how she responds to your presence. Even before words are exchanged, her face lights up slightly when she sees you. Her body turns toward you without effort. She pauses what she's doing to acknowledge you fully. These reactions are instinctive, not calculated. Attraction pulls attention forward. It narrows the field. When she's attracted, you don't compete with distractions. You become the center of her awareness, if only for a moment. That moment matters because it reveals where her energy naturally wants to go. Energy shift also appears in emotional openness. She becomes more expressive around you, even if she's generally reserved, or she becomes calmer and more grounded if she's usually animated. Attraction doesn't always amplify. Sometimes it stabilizes. She may lower her guard without realizing it, allowing herself to be more genuine, less performative. This authenticity is energy in its most honest form. Politeness maintains social masks. Attraction softens them. The shift feels like a quiet exhale, a subtle ease that wasn't there before. There's also a noticeable change in how she reacts to you versus others. With friends or acquaintances, her responses may be automatic, predictable. With you, there's more nuance. She reacts emotionally rather than socially. She responds to what you mean, not just what you say. Laughter lasts longer. Eye contact holds. Pauses feel comfortable rather than awkward. These are signs of emotional attunement. Her energy is syncing with yours, responding rather than operating on autopilot. What makes energy shift so significant is that it cannot be faked for long. Words can mislead, actions can be restrained, but energy always leaks truth. When attraction is present, her nervous system responds differently. She becomes more alert, yet more relaxed, more expressive, yet more controlled. It's a paradox that only attraction creates. And because it's unspoken, it often communicates more than direct signals ever could. If you feel that interactions with her carry a different weight, a different texture, a subtle intensity that doesn't exist elsewhere, you're not imagining it. Energy doesn't lie. It reveals where attention, emotion, and interest are quietly converging, shaping the space between you in ways that are felt before they are ever understood, where presence becomes palpable, where connection hums beneath the surface, where something unspoken shifts simply because you're there. Attention is one of the most valuable forms of currency a person possesses because it is finite, personal, and constantly being claimed by countless demands. When a woman gives you her attention consistently and intentionally, it is never meaningless. Politeness offers surface engagement. Attraction allocates resources. Where attention goes, emotional value follows. When she is attracted, her attention is not scattered randomly. It becomes focused, selective, and sustained. This focus is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet and steady, revealing itself through presence rather than pursuit. You can see this currency in how she prioritizes you without announcing it. She notices when you speak, even in group settings. She tracks your reactions. She responds to what you say rather than waiting for her turn to talk. This level of attentiveness requires effort, and effort is never wasted on indifference. Friendly attention is reactive. It appears when prompted and disappears just as easily. Attracted attention remains active. It looks for opportunities to engage, to respond, to stay connected. It doesn't need a reason. The interest itself is the reason. Another indicator of attention as currency is memory. She remembers details that had no obvious importance at the time. Not the things that would impress socially, but the things that reveal you. A comment you made casually, a preference you mentioned briefly, a thought you didn't emphasize. These things stay with her. Memory is attention extended over time. When she recalls these details later, it's a sign that you occupied mental space even when you weren't present. Politeness lives in the moment. Attraction lives beyond it. Attention also shows in how she reacts to your absence. When you're not around, she notices the gap. She may reference something you would have appreciated or bring you up unexpectedly. This doesn't mean longing or dependency. It means awareness. You've become part of her mental environment. Friendly interactions don't leave impressions that linger. Attraction does. It creates continuity. A sense that the connection doesn't reset every time you part ways. The way she invests attention during conversation is another powerful signal. She doesn't rush you. She doesn't steer everything back to herself. She allows space for your thoughts to unfold. Even silence becomes shared rather than awkward. This is a form of respect rooted in interest. Attention given freely creates emotional safety. When she's attracted, she offers this space naturally because she wants to experience you, not manage the interaction. Attention as currency also reveals itself through subtle sacrifice. She chooses to stay present even when distractions exist. She delays something else to finish a conversation. She shifts her schedule slightly without framing it as effort. These are small decisions, but they reflect value. People protect their attention fiercely. When someone spends it willingly, it's because the emotional return matters to them. What confuses many men is mistaking accessibility for attention. Being available is not the same as being attentive. A woman can be reachable without being invested. Attraction narrows focus. It filters noise. When she is truly interested, her attention carries intention, depth, and continuity. It's not about how often she speaks to you, but how fully she shows up when she does. Attention is the most honest form of interest because it cannot be faked for long. And it always reveals where emotional value is being placed, where interest is quietly growing, where connection is being built moment by moment through presence, awareness, and the deliberate choice to engage when countless other demands are competing for the same limited resource. Attraction rarely announces itself in obvious ways. It doesn't rely on dramatic gestures or direct confessions, and it doesn't operate through guesswork or confusion. It reveals itself through patterns, through emotional investment that goes beyond politeness, through consistency that doesn't fade with convenience, through subtle testing that seeks emotional safety, through curiosity that wants to understand rather than impress, through an energy shift that's felt before it's seen, and through attention that's given intentionally because it carries value. These signals exist, not to confuse, but to communicate quietly. The difference between friendliness and attraction is not intensity, but intention. Friendliness is generous but shallow. Attraction is selective and sustained. It shows up in effort that isn't demanded, presence that isn't forced, and focus that doesn't need explanation. When you learn to recognize these cues, you stop overanalyzing words and start observing behavior. You stop guessing and start noticing patterns. Attraction becomes less of a mystery and more of a language, one spoken through consistency, energy, and attention rather than declarations. Understanding this doesn't mean assuming interest or rushing outcomes. It means responding with awareness instead of insecurity. It means meeting subtlety with confidence and interest with emotional steadiness. When you recognize attraction for what it is, you no longer chase clarity. You allow connection to unfold naturally, grounded in observation, patience, and presence, where nothing needs to be forced and everything meaningful reveals itself in time.